What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ready Right Next podcast. My name is Zach Hernandez, and as always, I am joined by my co-host Matt Llewellyn. We got a new look for you guys. I'm sure you guys can see it. Matt, I feel like it's been forever. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing really good, Zach. It has been forever. I haven't seen you guys in a while. I had a career milestone. I went and just got back to the mainland this week. I was over in Hawaii, Maui to be specific, for a while, kind of celebrating that move. But listen, it's one of my favorite times of the year. It's the new league year coming up. It's free agency. It's the draft. It's the 49ers offseason. So let's jump right into it, man.
Yeah, man, there's so much going on. Real quick before we get into it, guys, if you're watching on Twitter, head over to YouTube right now, youtube.com/49ers Hive. Join there so we can see and interact with your comments. If you're commenting on Twitter, we're not ignoring you. We just can't see anything. So go to YouTube, make sure you can actually make your voice heard and join the discussion. So Matt, so much has happened. I feel like last week, Dion held it down while you were out.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dion, for that.
Yeah.
Also, before we really jump into it and get started, happy birthday week to Melissa. Happy birthday.
Definitely happy birthday week.
Happy birthday.
That's awesome.
It's one of our originals.
Yep. We love it.
HMTAR, how was Hawaii? It was sick, dude. It was so good. So February, we went February's peak humpback whale watching season. So we went out on the boat. It's still like 80 degrees, 85 degrees. Beautiful blue water. Go out there. Had a bunch of Mai Tais, had a whole week of good times, flew out first class. Your boy was fancy. But it's time to get back to the grind. Enough about me. Let's get into this, Zach. So continue on, my good sir.
Yeah, man. I'm really jealous of you, but that's all right. I think one of the main things that has been the last couple of days, specifically kind of going on 49ers Twitter, which I'm sure you missed desperately, Matt, is whether or not George Kittle should be traded. Grant kind of floated the idea out there, if I remember correctly, first. A lot of people got on him. Is there any truth in what he's kind of suggesting here? Or do you think it's just another bag of hot air?
So I read what he wrote, and I know he's doing the same Grant thing that he always does, right? He's trying to stir up controversy, stir up conversation, trying to put an opinion out there that he knows is going to give him some content to, have going forward through what right now is kind of the dead period, right? Like you can't make any official moves. The combine hasn't happened yet. You're just doing we're all doing our bare minimum, like, groundwork on new draft picks and prospects or whatever. And so, you for a content guy like Grant, he's got to put something out there. But reading through the 10, I don't think that it's a likely scenario that the 49ers have to do, like Grant put it, the 49ers need to trade Kittle as quickly as possible. But I will say there needs to be that, like, kernel, that little baby root, that seed of a thought, right? Kittle is going into, he's about to enter his 30s. He's 29 years old. He has injury history. There is some stuff there. We don't know. Listen, I think he's going to be a perfect professional, but we don't know behind the scenes what kind of feelings there are going to be for the 49ers moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo, one of his good friends. I think, it's something to look at. I don't think for this year. I think if you want to look at that further into 2023 or whatever, start justifying it there. But I think the last thing that you want, and shove all the Brady noise aside, shove Aaron Rodgers noise aside, whatever. Trey Lance is going to start for this team next year. And I think the last thing that you need to do for Trey Lance to set him up for success is to take away one of his weapons. That makes no sense to me. It is what it is. The contract is what it is. It doesn't look great in hindsight because he has been injured, but at the same time, it's more than just, Grant rolled out, he's not the number one option. He's the number 3 option because you have Debo's the obvious number 1. You have Ayuk number 2, Kittle's 3. But what Grant didn't touch upon is how great a blocker Kittle is from the tight end position. And so he does a lot of things that go under the radar, things that Travis Kelce doesn't do, things that Gronk used to do, but that, age has caught up to him. I think Gronk is actually a good test case where when Gronk came back to Tampa Bay, it was clear that he wasn't the same Gronk that he was in New England. And George does have a lot of mileage on him. So I think for 2022, you absolutely need George Kittle to establish Trey Lance. 2023, 2024, maybe, that's when you start to look at grooming a replacement for him, if not getting value for him outright. Because as Grant said, if he has another injury-plagued year, I don't think he's going to hold the value that he would have right now. So you really do have to thread a line and kind of maybe just play it as it is, see how he does at the beginning of the season, see how his attitude is in the locker room. And again, this is not me saying that George is going to be some malcontent right off the bat or anything. There's just a lot of moving parts here. The 49ers have lost a ton of their coaching staff. They have a ton of free agents. They have 9 draft picks that could turn into more once they move Jimmy Garoppolo. So there's going to be an influx of people. The salary cap is going up. When you get Jimmy's contract off the book, that gives them some room. There's going to be a ton of turnover on this team. This is going to be a completely different team going forward. So you have to start looking at some of those legacy veterans being like, I don't know, maybe this is the time. So I don't think 2022 is it, but going forward, maybe.
Yeah, and I think Nothing But Niners is making a good point here with this comment. The money just doesn't make sense. The fees money versus cap hit is too similar, and I think we should move on from Kittle, just not this season.
Yeah, I don't know what his contract is. I'd have to look, but I would imagine I know that his big salary kicks in for this season for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Also, Hug Fat said he still finished with almost 1,000 yards as the number 3, which is kind of crazy.
And I don't think he was the number 3. I think he was honestly the number 2 because Ayuk really came on at the end and he had like a lot of good games. But again, he was in that Shanahan doghouse inexplicably for the first half of the year, which to me, maybe it's worth it going forward. And he did make an impact in the late season, in the playoffs. That's something that you can't deny. I think it was a teaching moment, but I could see going into 2022, Kittle kind of being that third with Jimmy. But I think with Trey Lance, he's going to get bumped up. Trey Lance is going to need that security blanket as he gets his feet wet. Just remember that, yes, he started 2 games, played 2.5 kind of, but he only played 1 last year. So you're talking about 3.5 games in 2+ years. He's going to need somebody to, be open and work the middle, and Kittle does that really well. So I don't think the 49ers can afford to get rid of him. And I think really, in my opinion, it's just Grant trying to get some traction for some clicks.
I agree with you there. I think, and we talked about this in the chat, he is 20. I think he's 28 going on 29. As a tight end, you talked about that as well, kind of the career expectancy. And he's already had some monster seasons.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think Grant is being a little kind of hot takey here, but I think there is a legitimate argument to be made whether or not his best years are behind him. I vote no. Because of what he did that with kind of a handicap at quarterback. I think with Trey Lance under center, it hopefully will open up a lot more. And that's still with Trey Lance as a large unknown.
And to that point, if Trey Lance, it does what we think he can do, and that stretch the field, now all of a sudden, what's the biggest issue with Jimmy Garoppolo? Man, he throws between the numbers, and everybody knows that he throws between the numbers. But that's where Kittle wants to work the most. So if you get Trey Lance that can open up the outside, open up the deep thirds of the field on the outside, now all of a sudden Kittle has more room to work with where he can cook slower, flat-footed linebackers and get open. Kittle's a pretty good route runner. He knows how to get open. It's just when you're running all your routes to the same spot, sometimes it's a traffic jam and you're not going to be able to get the ball. So I would like to see if Trey Lance can establish himself. Hey, he's going to throw the deep ball like we think that he can. Maybe that gives Kittle something to work with. And absolutely, maybe his best year is not behind him.
Yeah. I think also if Kittle's moved, does Ross Welly become your number 1? Charlie Warner? I mean, these guys who have not really developed behind George Kittle, I think worries me more than the thought of George Kittle falling off within the next 2 years, because there's really a huge unknown behind George Kittle. And we know what George Kittle is. Like you said, the blocking, the receiving, the leadership that he brings, I think is infinitely more valuable than what any type of pick they could get for him.
And that's a huge part of it. I think that they would probably do something like, would it shock me this year if they took a flyer out on somebody like OJ Howard and have Shanahan try to rehab somebody who I mean, you talk about, tight end draft picks. Last year, obviously, Atlanta, they got the can't miss guy, right? It's just Kyle Pitts was that guy that you're just like, okay, he can't miss, he can't miss. But before that, who's the last one you remember? For me, it was OJ Howard coming out of Oklahoma, where it was just like, oh, he can't miss. Or Alabama. Colleges confuse me. I don't even know. Alabama. I don't know. One of those red teams. But OJ Howard, where he was coming out of college, they were like, he can't miss. He's got 4.4 speed. He's this huge guy. He played really well in college. And honestly, it was one of those things where, thanks, Wano. It was Bama. Where everybody said he can't miss. And then he goes to Tampa Bay and he completely underwhelms. Now, is that because of Arian's scheme? Is that not what they're doing with OJ Howard? He goes from having a quarterback like Jameis Winston to having a guy like Brady. Maybe he had, and Brady, he's the GOAT, right? For as great as he is, we know that if you piss him off, he will not throw you the ball. And then, obviously after that first, halfway through that first season, they're bringing back Gronk. They had Cameron Brate there. So Howard gets lost in the shuffle. That could be a reclamation project. And if Shanahan can do that, you're talking about a guy who's going to be young, who's going to be a playmaker. And maybe that's when you think of, okay, maybe George Kittle, it's time to start thinking about the next step with him. So let's shout out these super chats.
Yeah, definitely. Fernando, thank you very much. He says, how much money do you think the Niners will free up in cap space? Which players do you think will get restructured? Sean McVay beat Kyle in the NFC Championship game and now has a ring. Do you think he's better than Kyle, Matt? You missed this whole debate last week.
I know. I did miss this whole debate. I think the 49ers have to try to do something with the D Ford contract. They have to do something with that. He just got his injury guarantee, so that turned into a full guarantee. And so, there's a lot there that they're leaving on the table. I think some of the guys, again, it's going to be a tough year. It's going to be some attrition going on. I think guys like Jaquaski Tart might be gone. The guys that they can bring back on a vet minimum, they're probably going to bring back on a vet minimum. People like Jason Verrett, people like Raheem Mostert, they're going to offer them the minimum. They're going to say, go out and test the waters, see what you get. They did this last year too. They're probably going to move on from K'Wan Williams. There's a lot of turnover that's going to happen. I expect probably they might move on from Mike McGlinchey. So, when you look at it in that respect, they could free up some cap space. I don't know how much they're going to be able to. There are ways to restructure it. And as we know, the cap is imminently manipulated. So as far as Sean McVay being better than Kyle, he has a better record. But I don't think, listen, that was the NFC Championship game was the first time McVay beat Shanahan. So it was one clutch moment that McVay needed. But if you turn the tables, right, and it's the 49ers making the Super Bowl against Cincinnati, I think the 49ers beat the Bengals too. So, and it's not like it was a horrendously one-sided NFC Championship game that was tightly contested. And I don't think that it came necessarily down to the coaches. I think it came down to Jimmy Garoppolo not making the plays that he needed to. So, they're from the same tree. They're going to be very similar, but I have to give McVay the nod in terms of his record, but I can't just say definitively that he's better than Kyle because I don't believe that.
I agree with you there. Just adding in real quick, I didn't think I heard Jimmy Garoppolo when you were talking about the cap space. So obviously that'll free up a good amount of
yeah, I said when they trade him. Yeah, that's going to be $24 million that they're going to have.
That's a nice chunk of change right there.
On top of between that and the jump post COVID, it's going to be close to like $40 million in cap space from the Niners, plus what they can restructure.
Yeah, so they're going to be sitting nice. And just to add my 2 cents into the last question, I know you asked Matt, but if I think Sean is better than Kyle, I don't think Sean is better than Kyle. I think I got a lot of heat because I said he sunned Kyle this year. My whole thought process, Matt, and I told Dion this last week, is that going back to January, he understood that he needed a guy like Matt Stafford. He was kind of playing the long game and said, I hate to say long game because it's kind of not the long game. He got an older quarterback, whereas Kyle Shanahan is playing the long game with a younger quarterback. but over the course of a season. And he said, I'm going to do what I can now so that I can beat him if we meet for a third time in January, which they ended up doing. And Sean McVay got the best of Kyle Shanahan, but I wouldn't say he's better than Kyle Shanahan. And I agree with what you said. It came down to quarterback.
Yeah, I think you got hate because it was you said sunned, but
yeah,
we have one more super chat from our boys over at Nothing But Niners, which we super appreciate.
Thank you very
much.
much
For showing the love. Like, we love you guys. You know, we all come from the same place. We were, you know, at once, you know, we're just spreading 49ers love. So we appreciate having you. And if you feel like contributing, please contribute. You don't have to watch in silence, but if you choose to, that's okay too.
Exactly. Yeah, we love it. Barry Baller says, I want Evan Ingram. Interesting. I like that.
Yeah, there's some free agent tight ends out there that will be good number twos that could definitely fit Shanahan's scheme and could lessen the impact if they do in 2023 decide to move on from George Kittle. I do think that you have to look at it as like this year. I think the cap number is too prohibitive, and I think that it's too important to have continuity for Trey Lance to really take that step forward.
Yeah. Norkel Bill asked, how many picks have we received after all these coaching departures? I believe just the 2, right? From Mike McDaniel.
Yeah. But only 1 for this year for Mike McDaniels.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then I think it's 1 next year.
And speaking of the coaching departures, they've lost 8 coaches this year, which is insane. McDaniel, Hightower, John Embry, Wes Welker, Butch Berry, Zach Yenser, James Betcher, and Rich Scangarello. So it's a long list, and it really is going to be interesting to see how Kyle Shanahan can overcome all of those, departures.
Fernando in the comments, never apologize. That was a good question. I wasn't here for it, and so I love giving my opinion. Kyle versus McVay is going to be a thing for as long as both are there. Who knows how long that's going to be, though, because obviously the rumor was that McVay was going to dip out. And the rumor is Aaron Donald was going to dip out, too. And, man, I would have loved that. That would have made the division real easy, but
I didn't buy it. I don't know why. I didn't buy specifically Aaron Donald. Speaking of that,
I'm torn on Aaron Donald, though. I still think that he might dip.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. Speaking of dipping out, have you heard about this story with John Lynch and all of that? I mean, it's kind of crazy, right?
Where Amazon offered him a bunch of money.
Yeah. And
so the rumor is they offered him 3 times what his contract was. And the fact that he stayed tells me that he's in it to win it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my take was everybody was talking about that really awkward press conference, like when they asked him the question and they kind of like chuckled and looked nervously at each other. And it was like a real awkward moment. I just think that, for a regime that's used to nothing leaking, I think that the leak probably came from the Amazon side and that John and Kyle were a little surprised that somebody had fished that out and got it.
Yeah.
And that's why you see that awkwardness. So, because if it was something where John was really actually interested in leaving and going to TV, 3 times your yearly salary would do it for me. I mean, if another hospital came and was like, we're going to pay you 3 times what you make, I'd be like, gone. I'm coming. Let's go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, at some point, that bread, it just smells so fresh, right? Yeah. But if he's sticking with that old loaf, that means he loves it,
Yeah, and I think it was a little crazy because we talked about it at the time, and I don't know about anybody else, but that was the first I heard of it when he was asked at that press conference, is there any truth to the reports that you're thinking of going back to media? And yet they were kind of like, where did this come from? And then it came out, like you said, they were offering him tons of money. I mean, is there something to be said that he took the meeting? Because I think they went out to dinner and everything. Or do you think he's just kind of weighing his options and decided he's dedicated to the 49ers and it's really nothing there?
I think that there's certain things in life, right, where like if somebody comes calling, you take a listen. You know what I mean? I don't know if anybody will get. I mean, what's a big national like if Johns Hopkins comes calling to me, right, and it's like, you want to work for our hospital, that's definitely something I'm taking. Or like a research institute like UCLA, I'm definitely taking. For John Lynch, if Amazon comes calling, then you pick up the phone and you see what they have to say and you entertain that idea. To just rebuff them right off the bat while being something that is like, I'm showing solidarity. I don't think is a smart from a business aspect, because that solid rebuff is kind of like burning a bridge, right? It's just like, if Amazon calls you and you're like, oh, hell no, right? Are they ever going to come calling again? As opposed to, man, we had dinner. He was very charming. You know, John had a lot of great things to say about Amazon. He learned about the company. And then in 2 years' time, if John decides that he needs a change or whatever, maybe they come back to him with an offer that's similar and he can take it at that time. There are certain institutions and companies and things like that in any industry where you have to at least take the phone call. And I think this is one of those situations.
That's really well said. I think that's a good way to kind of break it down, is that he kind of owes it and he wanted to keep a relationship there. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? I want to touch on this comment from Brandon, because Richard Sherman said on his podcast recently he expects Stephen Gilmore to go to either the 49ers or the Seahawks. Do you envision the 49ers pursuing Gilmore at all?
Maybe. My issue is it's going to be dependent on what D'Amico Ryans truly wants to do, right? Everybody assumes that D'Amico Ryans is this press monster, like he wants to create pressure and this and this and that. And that's fine and dandy, because, the Patriots play a lot of cover one. They play a lot of man. Cover zero, they run blitzes, all that stuff. So you need to be out on an island. You need to control your man. And that's what I think that Stephon Gilmore does really well, is man coverage. Zone, I don't know if he's as adept, and I don't know what D'Amico Ryans is really looking to do, because they only ran man in 12% of the plays. Now, if they look at the tape and they see that Gilmore is a really solid zone coverage guy, with his age getting up there, he could be a decently priced veteran addition. And at that point, what you're really looking for is on those third down and longs, which the 49ers tend to struggle at, where you want to play that man coverage, right? Because you're either blitzing or you're disguising a look. Then maybe that's something that you take a look at. But there are other guys I think that would probably fit within the budget a little better, if I'm being honest. I think Stephon Gilmore still has enough cachet within league circles to cost a little much for what the Niners want to pay.
I agree. I think he's going to be pretty pricey. And for somebody, he could still play, but I think that the kind of knock on him has been, if he's not motivated, he's not going to give it his all.
Oh, and by the way, let's just knock the JC Jackson stuff out right now. The 49ers are not going to pay what JC Jackson wants. The only teams that are going to pay him that are bad teams. That's just plain and simple. That's how it is.
And he's probably going to get tagged, even if worst case scenario.
Probably.
Yeah. So I don't see him leaving, unfortunately. Melissa says, guys, are you on the keep Tart bandwagon now because of his play down the stretch, or is it a money thing?
I think it's just a he's getting older thing, and you look at his injury history, and it's one of those things where, like, anybody who's saying, like, cut him because he dropped that pick is an idiot. Like, sorry, like, it has to go beyond that. But I just think that I think they drafted Hufanga specifically to kind of slide in as a Tart replacement, and there are just so many needs elsewhere. The 49ers have proven that they can get by with a little bit less in the secondary. And you're talking about, a center fielder type safety is the most valuable type of safety, but that's not even the way the 49ers play, right? And now you're talking about Tart, who's a more, he's very much a traditional strong safety. And that's like, even more so than a free safety, that's less value, right? You can get Hufanga to do a lot of what he can be, a poor man's Tart at this stage in his career. And he's immensely cheaper, right? And doesn't have the huge injury history. There are free agents out there that you can go get for cheap. I just think the one area that concerns me is when you look at Jaquiski Tart, the rapport and the chemistry that he has with Jimmy Ward is something that you really have to weigh. If you're going to move on from him, you really have to know in your heart of hearts that Hufanga can step in and kind of carry that chemistry. You can't have two players play together for years and years and have that type of chemistry and just expect to replace it right off the bat. So I'm kind of torn. If I had to guess, I do think the 49ers probably move on from Tart, though.
I was surprised they brought him back last year. I thought last year they were definitely going to move on. And look, like you said, all the signs are kind of on the wall. They drafted Hufanga. They used him, sparingly throughout the year. They would put him in pretty key moments. And Hufanga kind of got burnt at times, but he was a rookie. And I think they want to see him develop. And I think they'll go from there. I do think Tart will likely be too expensive for the 49ers to keep. When they have a guy like Hufanga, who they probably feel like we could get 75% of what we're getting for a rookie contract.
Right.
I'm cool
And
with
here's
that.
the thing. Tart was able to come back because, one, he was coming off that huge turf toe injury, and we didn't know how he was going to come back. And I think that lessened his market. And then you compound that with the lowered salary cap after the pandemic year. And you're looking at a lot of players had to kind of crawl back and go back to their original teams for a vet minimum or a really cheap 1-year contract because there just wasn't the money or the market out there for these guys. Tart comes back, shows that he can stay healthy and make an impact, really. And you're looking at a guy who still has some mileage left for sure. And maybe the market out there is a little more robust for him this year. It's one of those things where safeties a lot of times will trade teams or go to a different spot or whatever. Somebody will watch some tape. So I think there's a very real possibility. I mean, I still can't count out somebody like Robert Saleh and the Jets come calling and say, hey, man, we got a spot for you over here for a little bit more money than what the 49ers are going to give you, and have him go over there. So I just think that when it push comes to shove, I think that he might be gone. Fernando asked if I was all in on. I'm not all in on bringing Raheem Mostert back. I would bring him back on a very heavy incentive laden 1-year deal.
Same. I mean, the running backs the 49ers have on the roster on contract, that none of them possess that speed that Raheem Mostert has. And if they could just get that change of pace guy like Mostert who could just hit that hole and gone, he's gone, home run hit, that would be nice to have.
My argument to that is that Elijah Mitchell in his rookie year had a higher yards total in the season despite only playing like 11 games than Raheem Mostert has ever had in his entire career.
And I'm not
like
that.
Elijah Mitchell is the more dynamic and better running back.
Yeah.
Mostert has that game-breaking speed. And if you use him as you're doing it like when Mostert was back one or whatever, and then you bring in like Breida as the change of pace back, it's Breida time for Raheem Mostert. Like he needs to be that change of pace back where Elijah Mitchell's getting a lot of carries. But I want people to realize that whatever happened in camp aside, however he got into the doghouse aside, I do believe that Trey Sermon was drafted with the RPO and Trey Lance in mind. So just keep that in mind. There are ways that you can incorporate a Trey Sermon in there that you just can't with Raheem Mostert. And I just think that it's going to be a competition. Elijah Mitchell is clearly going to be Shanahan's favorite going into next year. And if they bring Mostert back, it's going to be a competition between Mostert and Trey Sermon. And it's really going to depend on the type of offense that Shanahan wants to scheme for Trey Lance.
I like it. We're going to get back to the topics, but we will get your comments. Like Raphael 562 says, hit like and subscribe, everyone. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
So we all know what's going on. The 49ers are going to move forward with Trey Lance this season. They were kind of being coy about it. Oh, there's a 100% chance Jimmy can still come back. And then Jimmy gets up at the podium and he's like, yeah, John and I were trying to find a nice place for me to go. Where do you think Jimmy will end up? Because Ryan Clark is all but pounding table for him to go to Pittsburgh, basically. Is that realistic or do you not see it?
It's possible because Pittsburgh has this legacy of making the playoffs and, trying to be one of the premier franchises in the NFL, which they've been for years and years. So a Jimmy Garoppolo, when you look at him versus a Mason Rudolph or a Duck Hodges, I mean, it makes the most sense in the world for Jimmy Garoppolo to be clear and away the best player there. And you think Steelers, and it kind of fits until you start worrying about like November, right? It gets rainy, it gets snowy, and we all see the medicine balls that Jimmy just pushes out in bad weather. And you just wonder, does Jimmy Garoppolo fit in that Northeast weather in the winter? And I don't know that he does. For me, is it possible that he ends up in a Washington or a Pittsburgh? Sure. But from a coaching standpoint, from a setting him up for success with a decent, pretty good roster and a favorable environment, I hear a lot of noise about Carson Wentz being on his way out in Indianapolis. And so for me, I think the most sense is for Jimmy Garoppolo to go to Indianapolis. The only issue with that is after spending that conditional pick on Carson Wentz, will they be reluctant to do the same for Jimmy Garoppolo? Honestly, at this point, the sooner you get rid of Jimmy, the better. But I just think in terms of fit for Jimmy Garoppolo, Indianapolis is the best, but it might not be where he ends up.
Yeah, that is a good point. It would be wild to see them cut ties after 1 year in on the Carson Wentz experiment.
There was a story that came out today for Carson Wentz that it's not only on-field stuff.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes a lot more sense than if the team's just fed up with him all around, not even just his performance. Yeah, I could definitely see Indy. I don't know if Pittsburgh is as realistic when it comes to ranking these destinations. Washington, possibly. I don't see Denver. I know a lot of people like to connect.
I would like to see Jimmy in Denver. That mile high air kind of negates some of the weather factors of it, right? Like it's a little bit easier to throw a football there, and they have some weapons that they can, I mean, you're talking about, Jerry Jeudy and some of those offensive weapons, and it's just like there's potential there. And it's, I guess the latest rumor is that Aaron Rodgers is going to stay in Green Bay.
Yeah.
So if Denver can't get Aaron Rodgers and, Seattle maybe not moves on from Russell Wilson this year or asks a too high a price, maybe Denver decides to give San Francisco a call and be like, hey, the two front offices have worked together before. I know that John Lynch and John Elway are really good friends, and I wouldn't be surprised if in his desperation to really get a contender out on the field for Denver, if John Elway kind of gave Lynch a sweetheart deal for Jimmy Garoppolo. I just don't want people to kind of write that off right off the bat.
I think
I know Ben Albright doesn't think so, but
he's very out on it. I think, like you said, the other main quarterback pieces need to fall first and fall the Niners' way in order for that to happen.
And it could be definitely a time crunch because I think they want to get rid of Jimmy as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Before we talk about Trey Lance, Fernando says, I'm so happy Rick Scangarello is gone. Who will be the quarterback coach for Trey Lance now? And how will Anthony Lynn benefit Lance and the running backs?
Dude, the Anthony Lynn hire, I love. It's a great hire. I think Anthony Lynn is going to do wonders for Trey Lance and those running backs. I thought that Anthony Lynn as a head coach was a little underrated with the Chargers. It was really, the Chargers always score points, right? It was really just a defensive kind of thing. But in a coordinator / offensive assistant role, man, Anthony Lynn is going to do wonders. As for who the quarterback coach is going to be, I don't know. But I trust that Shanahan is going to fill his staff out with people that he knows and that he trusts. So, there's definitely going to be some change into how they're going to run the scheme. I think that Shanahan is going to tweak his scheme a little bit for the Lance skill set. I think that he's going to learn from that Arizona game where it's like we can't run all these design quarterback plays because Trey Lance is not a Lamar Jackson, right? Like he's not a runner in that vein. What he is a pocket passer with escapability, much more in like an Aaron Rodgers type mold or a Patrick Mahomes type mold, right? Where running is absolutely the last option. And it should be viewed as such. So whoever they get has to kind of meld well with what Shanahan has already done and where Shanahan is going to go. And I think that Anthony Lynn, with his experience, the fact that they brought him in, the fact that Shanahan is like finally getting on board with, we're going to go with Lance, we're going to transition this offense, that's going to inform where they go. And I think I just trust Kyle to make the right decisions with his personnel.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially after all of the departures that we just went over. It's hard to kind of pin down who will get that job. But like you said, I think he'll give it to the right guy. And I think the 49ers there were kind of rumors coming out that there was some internal coaching issues with as far as who they wanted for quarterback in the draft. Some wanted Max. I think some wanted Justin, and then they ended up going with Trey, obviously. Perhaps that's why we saw this kind of long list of departures this season. But
can I just tell you too, like as somebody who was on the Justin Fields train, after watching him play in Chicago and watching the limited Trey Lance snaps that I got, I think that Trey Lance is better.
It's hard to say,
Justin Fields looks super confused out there, dude.
Yeah, he looks more athlete than quarterback.
And people will shit on Nagy, but at the same time, Nagy made the playoffs with fucking Mitch Trubisky twice.
Yep.
You know, so I don't want to put 100% blame on Nagy. I don't think that he's like a great coach by any stretch, but Justin Fields just looked panicked out there, and it wasn't a good look. Whereas when Trey came into the game, you know, the Texans game is a perfect example, right? Comes out too amped up, looks terrible in the first half, and then whatever the coaches did at halftime really just snapped something into place, and he had a really good second half in that game. So, yeah, I just looking back on it, man, I think that Lance is the right fit for this offense, and I'm excited for him going forward. And Stewart saying that Bobby Slowick may get the promotion from pass game coordinator. He's already working with Lance. I wouldn't mind that. Some continuity for a young quarterback is really good. So that very well could be that they just keep that continuity and then keep it going.
Definitely. Speaking of that, Fernando says, I think Kyle should hire John Beck, in my opinion, for Trey Lance's quarterback coach. They work together in the offseason. I just want to say I was listening to the Haberman and Middlecoff podcast, and they were like talking about how Beck worked with guys like Lance and Zach Wilson. And then they go, oh, he was on the Jets coaching staff this season. They went to look up the roster. Apparently the dude's already been let go, and they kind of made a joke that he was 1099 for the whole year. And it's kind of funny because he's kind of everywhere. John Beck, you hear him, QB Collective, he was on the Jets roster. Now, again, he's not signed with any team. It would be cool to see if they could bring him in just to have that continuity with Trey Lance. That's going to be huge. It really is going to be huge to his development. So this is the last we can talk about Trey Lance because there's obviously a lot of unknowns. There are tons of hot takes. I tweeted out, I want to say a week or two ago, what are some realistic expectations statistically if he plays 17 games next season, Matt? Right now, based off of the limited information we know, what would you say you would expect from him? Passing yards, touchdowns, interceptions, however you want to break it down.
Passing yards between 3,000 and 4,000. That's just the new NFL, the way that it is. A lot of pass heavy stuff. 30 total touchdowns. Break that down how you will. Maybe 8 rushing, 22 passing, or whatever. Probably between 12 and 16 interceptions. That's just, I mean, that's the way that young quarterbacks go. And probably a handful of fumbles if they're going to run him.
Right.
I want people to understand that Trey Lance is still a work in progress. I mean, if you look at it, you know, we were talking about it. Kenny Pickett's 24 years old. Trey Lance is 21. You know what I mean? Like, Trey Lance is, I think he's older or he's younger than every quarterback in this draft except for Sam Howell. Yeah. So you're looking at a guy, and by the way, if Trey Lance was in this year's draft class, he'd be the clear-cut number 1 pick in the draft. Yeah. And it wouldn't even be close. So you're talking about a guy that has immense talent, but has a lack of experience, right? People mash on Jordan Love and say that he sucks. Well, Jordan Love, you know, played 3 years in the Pac-12 at Nevada, played big boy football, lots of passing attempts, and Green Bay doesn't think he's ready. I think that Lance deserves a little bit more grace than that, considering that he was a safety in high school that was converted to quarterback and had 318 career passing attempts. So you have to give him some time to develop, and the potential's there. I mean, to switch positions in high school going into college and then end up as the number 3 pick in the NFL draft after 1 full college season as a starter. That's incredible, and it's unheard of. There's obviously huge raw talent there, and the coaches that Shanahan puts in front of him are really going to make a huge difference, as will Shanahan himself. But patience needs to be there, right? For all the people that are Jimmy honks that are going to come after Trey Lance, just remember that when Jimmy was out there making stupid throws, you were the first people to say, hey, man, hey man, you gotta give him some grace. You gotta give him some room, right? Because he just wins, bro.
Yeah.
Right? Trey Lance is gonna go through struggles. Trey Lance is gonna throw picks. We're all gonna sit there and kind of like, oh God, why did he throw that? Right? But just remember the context. Jimmy as an 8-year pro versus Trey Lance as a 21-year-old kid with 1 year of college starting experience at a Division II school.
Yep.
I think it's a huge difference, and there needs to be some grace and some patience. I think next year, regardless of statistics, if the 49ers make the playoffs and get into the dance, I would consider that a win.
I agree with you because look, I know a lot of people are going to say, but they got to the NFC Championship game. So anything shy of that is a failure with Trey Lance, but it's a different team. It will be a different team, obviously, every year. But now you have Trey Lance, a ton of different coaches. Mike McDaniel's gone. Luckily, they were able to keep DeMeco Ryans, but still, it's going to be a whole different situation next season. If they could just get into the dance, like you said, I'd be extremely happy with that moving forward with Trey Lance, because that's something to build on immediately. First year, you made the playoffs. I mean, not too many first-year quarterbacks can say that. So, yeah.
So with Stewart's comment here, Kyle should, and I think he will, hire coaches with backgrounds working with mobile QBs and developing young QBs. 49ers just hired a QC from college. I agree with the latter part of that, with developing young QBs. My problem is if you hire a coach that's used to working with mobile QBs, there's going to be some bias and encouragement to use that mobile athleticism a little bit too much. I think that Trey, in his limited action, definitely fell back to that a little too early. And so I think that you need a guy who's experienced with pocket passing and teach him pocket mechanics, and then be able to instill in him, hey, as a last resort, just know if you maneuver the pocket and you step up and there's still not anything there and you have a lane, by all means take it, right? It needs to be more of the Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes area where they're running because nothing else is there and they see an advantage where they can take it, right? Rather than just running the ball for running's sake and because you're an athlete. Because I think that those quarterbacks end up having a shorter shelf life. And to be honest, with the Cam Newtons, with the Lamar Jacksons, outside of somebody like Josh Allen, the people that rely on their legs hit a wall really early in terms of their refinement as passers, because it's just too easy to take advantage of the natural gifts that you have right off the bat, right? I think that Trey Lance, while athletic in terms of NFL athletes, it's not like he was in college, right? Like he's not that burner like Lamar Jackson. I think he's more comparable to a Josh Allen who's not again a burner by any means, right? He's a big dude that can get there, and they design certain plays, but that's because the threat of somebody like Stephon Diggs or a Cole Beasley or whatever, a Knox is there to kind of keep you from just exclusively playing the running game. And early on in Josh Allen's career, I think a lot of people were playing for his athleticism, and he had to prove that he could develop as a passer before they took that away. It works for somebody like Lamar, and Lamar has a fantastic completion percentage. He's got great tight ends, which is, again, why I think Kittle is so important. But the other thing about Lamar is he's just such an incredible athlete that, everybody's so worried about his running ability that he gets some of those layups where he can just hit. And, to be fair to Lamar too, he has a pretty nice deep ball.
He's good with it. Definitely takes a lot of criticism, but that's a really good point that I don't think a lot of people think about, is that if you get a coach that just specifies in kind of mobile quarterbacks, they might put a little too much on that. And I know Kyle, I think later on, said that the reason why he ran so much in Arizona is because he had an injury, but still, that's not something I want to see from Trey Lance going into next season, because it's kind of putting him at risk a little too much. So we can move off of Trey Lance. I know a lot of people are excited, as are we. But who do you
We're
think?
We're going to talk plenty of Trey Lance this offseason, ladies
Trust
and
me,
gentlemen. Don't worry
we got
about it.
7 months to talk about Trey Lance.
Absolutely.
Which of the other second-year 49ers, aside from Trey Lance, obviously, do you think will take a large step forward?
Ambry Thomas.
Ooh, I like
Man,
that.
I loved Ambry Thomas in the draft, and early on, I was like, "Dang, Ambry Thomas make me look hella dumb for talking." I remember the draft. Remember the draft show when we talked about it. I was like, watch for Ambry Thomas. He's a dude, right? Like he didn't play for COVID, but he's a guy that I really like." And we talked about the potential change in scheme from Robert Saleh to D'Amico Ryans, where I was like, "Man, if they're drafting Ambry Thomas because Ryans wants to play more press man, Thomas is good in press man, right?" And early on in the season, he looked kind of bad. And as the season went along and Josh Norman got more grabby and, Josh Norman looked washed and washed and washed and washed like that old t-shirt you've had for 20 years. Josh Norman's not going to be on this team, by the way, if you guys don't know that. It definitely, it turned into a situation of Ambry Thomas had the kitchen sink thrown at him, had to battle through adversity. I mean, he wasn't even active for games early on. They didn't even dress him. And he worked through that. And the 49ers defense towards the end of the season became so much more sound in the secondary. I felt so much better on third down and from a penalty perspective because Ambry was out there. Was he perfect? No, by all means, no. But your rookies aren't going to be perfect, right? And I feel that it's similar to how everybody was like really into Akella Witherspoon after his rookie year. There were strides definitely made, but the difference I think is that Ambry Thomas has more of that dog mentality in him. And I think that he's going to come back and he's going to make a huge, huge impact. And secondarily, just because there's nowhere to go but up, Trey Sermon.
I had a feeling that was going to get in there.
Yeah.
Trey Sermon, yeah. Ace Press's Moore will be the starting right guard.
I'd love to see something from Moore. We got to see something from Aaron Banks, dude. Like if you waste pick 44 on Aaron Banks, and I'm still salty about Creed Humphrey.
It's starting to look pretty bad.
Salty.
I agree with you. Even Celts Chronicles is Banks and Moore.
By the way, shout outs to my early draft crush, Tyler Linderbaum. I think they should draft him at center.
All right. Get it in there. I like it. Alex Mack he might not come back next year. I mean, I guess we'll see. But I'm going to say Banks and Moore, but also a guy like Diamador Lenore, who early on in the year fans were super high on, and then he couldn't find his way.
More than Thomas, right?
Way more than Thomas. People were saying he's already a starting corner ready. Oh my God, the 49ers have their new corner of the future. And then something happened and he just completely couldn't find the field with a map. I would like to see him take a large leap next year, especially if they're planning on moving on from K1, because he does not look like he is the same. Vincent, we're going to talk about this next, so I'll get back to your comments.
It's corner.
Yeah, it's corner. Hung Fat, great show, guys. Zach, like the new background, huh? Yeah, thank you.
Dude, everything looks good. I like your Hulk poster. That framed Fred Warner jersey is amazing.
Thank you.
By the way, I still need to ask you where you got your frame so I can do mine. Dude, if y'all need a jersey frame, don't go to somewhere like Michael's, man. They charge you like $500.
It's crazy expensive. I have had this jersey and this frame sitting right here in my closet for like at least the entire year.
Bro, I've got 3. I've got the Ayuk, I've got the Warner, and I've got the Frank Gore that I need to frame. Look at all this white behind me that I could totally make look way better.
Yeah. I'll send you the link to the frame. Perfect. I got. Stewart says, I'm hoping Aaron Banks gets on the field. That would be massive for the offensive line. And for Trey, Banks' pass protection was always better than his run blocking. So hopefully this offseason he can improve there. Yep. And
his problem is slow feet, man.
Yep.
And I think that's always something that before this, I was like, man, I don't know how much you can change that. However, the 49ers have a dude in-house with Juwan Jennings, who came out of Tennessee with really slow feet, and now he looks like he's picking up the baton that Kendrick Bourne left behind when he went to New England. And Juwan Jennings came on in the offseason, and he looks fantastic. I think Juwan Jennings has turned into what everybody wanted Jalen Hurd to be, which is pretty awesome.
That's a really good shout. I like that. Kind of that big target.
Yeah.
Guys you could throw a back shoulder fade to or something like that, and he'll catch it.
Yeah.
HR says, Spoon would dog it. Remember when he sat out the game? He wasn't even hurt. Oh,
I remember that game, and we will not say that MFer's name who gave up all those passes and all those penalties. but it was embarrassing that they had to actually, like, Spoon had to actually be like, okay, I'm not that hurt. I gotta go
Yeah,
in
I
there,
could play.
and
I could
came in
play.
to replace that fool. Oh, that was terrible. It rhymes with
Yeah,
Schmeyen Schmallen.
that was tough, man. That was
Oh,
really tough.
terrible.
Thanks, Ty Anderson. I appreciate it, man. I'm happy I finally got it up.
I mean, no
Uh,
lies, man. It looks good.
it looks, yeah. It took me like 2 hours, but hey, I got it. Ace versus best center in free agency, and let the two guys play guard. Two young guys play guard this year.
Absolutely. Like I said, like you can go out there and get somebody in free agency. I don't know what the center market's going to look like, but the other thing that you can also do is you could go out and get a guard, and you could draft Tyler Linderbaum, who is a savage. Iowa linemen are beasts.
Mm-hmm.
Are
Love that.
beasts.
Vincent Johnson says Ayuk's going to be a 1,200-yard pass catcher next season.
I hope so.
I could see it.
I hope so.
What he almost, I think he finished like 800 yards this season, and that was with.
He finished better than his rookie year, despite being in the doghouse early in the year.
Yeah, exactly. Jawan Jennings is awesome. Hope he and Trent Sherfield get more touches.
I don't think Trent Sherfield's going to be on this team next year.
I was going to say, there's too many mouths to feed.
Yeah,
too many mouths to feed.
I just don't think he's going to be on the team.
Well, I mentioned the Miami Week 5 disaster.
Okay, that was terrible. My wife gave me so much crap for that game.
That was one of the worst performances.
I know that you and I are talking. We're gonna probably be together for the 49ers Dolphins game. We'll be sitting together or whatever. Yeah. Man, I just listen. I need to knock on wood or something, but man, that would be the worst thing ever if we went to that game and my wife's sitting there laughing giddily because her Miami Dolphins are in it to win it. It's a good thing they got Tua, and Tua's not great. So
it can't be that much worse than going to the Cardinals game and watching
Colt McCoy light
us up. I spent my hard-earned cash on that game. That was trash.
Terrible.
All right, last topic of the night, Matt. We talked about this with Dion a little bit last week. If there is, excuse me, let me reword that. Is there a specific position the 49ers should address with their first pick, or would you prefer they just went with best player available?
There are two positions that they can address with their first pick, and I think the determination between that needs to be best player available. So a little bit of both. Interior offensive line, whichever way you want to slice it. I think, honestly, we've had this discussion, right? If you're going to bring back one of two, DJ Jones or Laken Tomlinson, my answer is Laken Tomlinson. You got to bring him back, right? I think Tomlinson you need to bring back and slot in at that left guard. After a rocky first year where I was like, man, I don't know about the chemistry between him and Trent Williams. They've hit a groove and they're really good together. But that center and right guard position are two that really need to be addressed. And maybe even right tackle if you don't know what you're doing with McGlinchey. So between the center to the right side of the offensive line, that's definitely one that you need to look at. And then corner is the other one that you really need to look at. And it's going to be a determination of where you are between the two, right? If you get early second, like you trade Jimmy for an early second rounder, right? And Tyler Linderbaum's there, draft him. But if he's gone, maybe you look at somebody like Roger McCreary, the cornerback from Auburn, who is going to slide down some boards because he has really short arms. And I know I talked about this, and I know some of you watch Locked On 49ers or listen to it with BD Peacock and Eric Crocker. And I know Croc talked about McCreary. I just want to say I was on record. I said that shit like days before Crocker did, just so you know. But I like McCreary. He's a guy that can play outside. He can slide inside. He's really good at negating separation. He stays in the pocket of receivers. It's just he's got really short arms, so that's going to be the big thing. But between those two positions, you have to really determine who's going to be the best player, who's going to be the sure thing, because you can't take a swing and a miss like they did on Banks this year. It has to be a dude that is just plug and play. You don't have a first round pick this year. So your first guy that you draft off the board has to be a plug and play. Plain and simple. There's no, pardon the expression, but there's no fiddle fucking around with any of these people. Like, they have to contribute day one. And so whether that's interior offensive line or you think that's a corner, that's what it has to be. I personally think that they probably go corner just because the top end offensive linemen are going to go quick, and corner is the deeper position in the draft that they're going to be able to get a quality guy at where they're picking.
I agree with you. I also want to just stress the division they play in. Look at the receivers in the NFC West. Not only Cooper Kupp, DeAndre Hopkins, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. I mean, it's an insane group of receivers the 49ers have to play 6 times a year. And I know we said Jimmy was, kind of when it came down to it in the NFC Championship game, it was because the 49ers had Jimmy and not Matt Stafford. But on the flip side, their corners couldn't really stop anybody. So they definitely could shore up that back end,
Yep.
getting some cornerback help. And I'm with you 100%. If the guy there is an immediate playmaker, could come in and contribute at corner, please take that guy. Please take him because they could desperately need him. What do you think is more likely here? Bliss is asking, if no DJ Jones, do you think Arden Key is staying?
Probably something like Arden Key or like a Mo Hurst or somebody like that. They just run so deep at defensive line. When you're looking at needs that you have to fill, something's got to give, and you're going to sacrifice a little bit of that, particularly interior defensive line depth, so that you can get somebody good at a different spot.
Right.
Or keep somebody as valuable as Laken Tomlinson is. Because if you look at interior offensive line versus interior O-line, it's vastly skewed in terms of depth towards the interior defensive line. And you're talking about, you don't have enough snaps to feed everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for checking us out, Celts Chronicles. Appreciate
absolutely.
You,
welcome. And we hope you come back.
Yeah. Also, the chat's talking about Kinlaw as well. He gets plugged right in the middle where Armstead has been. And I know people are saying, I don't trust him to stay healthy like Fernando, but we got to remember the surgeon said that they felt that they were able to correct the underlying issue. That was kind of been the whole problem to begin with.
And he had that issue since college.
Yeah.
And there was something about him that caused the 49ers and everybody really to project him in the top half of the first round.
Yeah.
So if they absolutely do correct that issue and he can come back and really contribute, you're talking about a potential beast on your hands. So I don't want to write him off yet. It's funny that people are like, oh, Kinlaw sucks. He was a waste of this and this and that. At the same time where they're like, man, but maybe Jalen Hurd, though. Maybe Jalen Hurd. And the only reason that Kinlaw gets dunked on the way that he does is because we traded DeForest Buckner for that pick. And Buckner is a fan-beloved player. And it's why I always say you root for the name on the front, not the name on the back. We should all be rooting for Javon Kinlaw to come back from surgery and be an absolute stud. And Ace Bro says Kinlaw got surgery by the same guy that did Bosa. And we all saw how Bosa came back. Bosa was a beast. And the fact that he didn't even get a single vote for Defensive Player of the Year is a crime.
It's a joke.
Didn't get Comeback Player of the Year? That's BS.
Yeah. Also, the same people, I just need to throw this out there, that were saying Kinlaw's a bust.
I guess Burrow deserved it, though, right?
Yeah.
Burrow kind of deserved it.
He did. The same people that are saying that, though, is that Kinlaw is a bust. They should trade him. They don't need him. I distinctly remember we're saying when he went down earlier in the year, how much the run defense suffered without him. Yep. They don't know if they're going to be able to overcome his loss. They were, because they shifted Armstead inside in the middle, but still.
Which I said that they had probably should have done a long time ago.
From the beginning.
I've talked about Armstead being an interior player for a long time.
Yep. What's up, Dion? Thanks for tuning in, man.
Thanks, Dion. Well. Welcome. Thanks for holding it down for me last week. I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah. Vincent says, go back in time and take Wirfs. LOL. Right. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, man. I think Kinlaw, I think people are writing him off a little too soon. I want to see him come back this year. It's hard to expect anybody to have the determination as Nick Bosa, because that man came back with a vengeance. But I think Kinlaw will still be able to come back and be pretty good and contribute a lot to the 49ers defensive line.
Right. Well, if we're thinking about it, so he had a tendonitis injury in college, which was like the big one, right? Yeah. And then he plays his rookie year. He gets hurt in Detroit and has that knee injury in that same knee. And it just wasn't right when they corrected it the first time. And so with the surgeon that did Bosa surgery saying that they think they corrected the problem, I have confidence, man, that he's going to come back. And if he get, even with the tendonitis, even if he's going to be a shorter shelf life guy, right? Like a Todd Gurley who has like a 5 or 6 year period, all we got to do is get Kinlaw through his rookie contract, man. And if we get him for the next 3 years with being productive, that's enough really with this window to really make an impact. And that's all we can really kind of, it's one of those things where what can you ask of a player beyond that, right?
Right.
So that's all we want.
Yep.
I feel like it's a compliment. Coaches are leaving and leveling up. I also think we will continue to bring Anthony Lynn type in, true leaders of men. Celts Chronicles, thank you for that comment. I absolutely agree with you, man. The fact that so many 49er coaches have been poached just says how solid that this staff is, right? Because even beyond, and we know Kevin O'Connell from the Rams, he got a job or whatever, but that's like really it, right? 8 49er coaches have been poached. And this is on top of the guys that left last year, Robert Saleh, whatever else. So you're looking at a coaching staff that the NFL is definitely believing in. And so that just bodes well for who they're going to replace those people with, where this team is going forward in the future. So, and I did have an amazing vacation, Dion, just so you know, it was pretty legit.
Also, just to touch on Celts Chronicles comment, I mean, back when the Niners were still bad, they had coaches getting poached. I mean, I remember when they were having those losing years early on in the Shanahan era, they were taking them no matter what. So I do think, like you said, it's a compliment. It's a testament to what Kyle Shanahan is doing here. And the Shanahan coaching tree, I'm predicting it now, in 5 years, the Shanahan coaching tree is going to have roots all over the NFL. It's going to look insane. Or branches, I guess I should say. Melissa says, we have time to Defoe, Eric, and DJ Jones all had missed time due to injuries. Javon shouldn't be written off yet, though. He's no Jalen Hurd. Sheesh. Agreed.
Yeah.
He showed a lot. I mean, he actually played. Kinlaw actually played.
Kinlaw has played, and he has potential.
Yeah.
Dion, even with Kinlaw back, we should still keep DJ Jones due to his injury history. I think DJ Jones is going to get too much money in the market where it's propped up by this, and you're looking at a team that runs 11 deep on the defensive line. And like 7 or 8 deep on the defensive tackle position. I think DJ Jones at this point is kind of expendable.
Yeah. And like you said, he's going to command too much money.
Yeah.
I
with
think
all the holes and the free agents that the 49ers have, they can't bring back everyone. Yeah. And I know it's a tough pill to swallow for everybody, but there are going to be some team favorites that end up leaving the team. That's how this goes every year. And it sucks. If we could keep everybody, absolutely, I'd love to keep everybody. But when you're looking at a player like DJ Jones, I know people are talking about Jordan Willis. What do you do with Jordan Willis, right? Arden Key, Maurice Hurst. You have Kinlaw coming back. You have Armstead, who's kicked inside and has a huge contract. Like, you're running out of snaps for all these players, and you can't just stack all this talent on your team without that. And it's not just a matter of the 49ers keeping them. Also remember, Ace Press, should we let go of Ebukam and sign Jones from Arizona? Hell no. Ebukam came on in the back half of the season. I think he has a lot of potential. He's younger and cheaper.
Yep.
Chandler Jones is on the backside of his career.
And he's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
I'd argue.
Ebukam? No, hell no, dude. We got him for cheap. But going back to what I'm saying is, it's not just the 49ers wanting to keep these players. It's players like DJ Jones and Arden Key and Mo Hurst going like, dude, I know that I'm better than the snaps that I'm getting. I know that I can make an impact if I get playing time. That's what leads people to go to places like Jacksonville or wherever, right? The Jets, because they're like, no, I'm better than what this is. So I'm going to get a payday and I'm going to play more. So
not only that too, but it's like, I think a lot of these players, like you touched on right there, is like I don't want to say they use the 49ers as kind of like a springboard, but they were able to come here, revitalize their career, kind of refresh their name, and now they're able to go and get more money elsewhere, and we might see that. I think the 49ers are going to have to choose between Tomlinson and DJ Jones.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the other.
To keep Tomlinson.
At best, it's one or the other. They might lose both of them. They very well could lose both.
Yep.
So it's something we're going to have to deal with. I think that's it for tonight's show.
Yep.
Sunday night, 8:00. I appreciate all of you. Melissa, we're going to touch on your comment last because we appreciate you very much. Aziz or Dre, if you had to keep one, which would it be for you, Matt?
I know people love to say Aziz Alshire. I still got to go with Dre Greenlock because he has less experience. He's younger, right? Like, Aziz has been around. He had a really good year this year. But before, you're talking about a dude that struggled to make the team. And, like, for me, Dre Greenlaw, listen, it's one of those things, right? It's recency bias because Dre Greenlaw was hurt with the groin injury and Aziz played really well this year. And people are like, oh man, Aziz, he's so good, right? But how much were people propping up Dre Greenlaw after he stopped old boy on the 1 yard line in Seattle in week 17 of the 2019 season? You know what I mean? As a rookie. So for me, I got to go with the younger dude. Yeah, he had some injuries. He had the same injury that Bosa had in college, right? He had the sports hernia or whatever and had to get that fixed. And like he struggled with it. That's for sure. That's for sure. But let's not pretend like Azeez Al-Shaair had an injury-free season either. Right? Like Azeez Al-Shaair was banged up. Dude was rocking the double Gronkowski at the end of the year, right? Both elbow braces and stuff going on, right? It's just I think that you can like them both. You don't have to keep one or the other. You can keep them both, you know. Greenlaw was a 5th round pick. Like he's cheap right now. You know, it's only year. He's going in. I think he's going into his last season this year under contract, and he's got to prove something.
Yeah.
And Azeez Al-Shaair, you can bring him back on a contract or whatever. I don't know what his contract is, but I think that you can like both of them and not necessarily need to get one or the other. But I would take Greenlaw over Azeez Al-Shaair because of the early success. And people soured on Greenlaw because of injury, not necessarily performance. Because you're talking about a guy, yeah, people talk about Greenlaw in coverage or whatever, but he's a young guy. You got to give him time, you know. So for me, I would take Greenlaw if I had to pick one or the other, because both dudes seem to get banged up. But I think it's just recency bias that's kind of leaning towards Azeez right now.
So call it recency bias, call it whatever. I'm taking Greenlaw. I'm taking Al-Shaair. I don't think that we have seen Greenlaw take over the way that Al-Shaair took over this season in an extended period of time. Greenlaw has been a hell of a linebacker too. But I just think that what we saw from Al-Shaair as far as changing the game, he made game-changing plays almost routinely this season. And he was an undrafted free agent. I think, yeah, he started out slow, but I think he's coming right into his prime. And I'm just real quick, I think to answer Melissa's question, if they're keeping one, I'm going to envision because they're trading one, I think they could get more for Greenlaw in return.
There you go.
Al-Shaair. So I'm kind of taking that into
my only pushback is that by all accounts, Fred Warner had a down year. But what's the difference?
Yeah.
DeMeco Ryans' first year defensive coordinator. So who's to say if Greenlaw didn't stay healthy that he wouldn't make the plays that Al-Shaair was playing? Because obviously Fred's role changed, which means that Greenlaw's role would have changed too. And because of the injury, it was an opportunity for Azeez to step up and really show what he can do. And that's not a knock against Azeez, but I'm also saying you can't just necessarily write off Greenlaw because you're transitioning to a slightly different scheme, and he didn't get to show what he could do. So that's my only pushback. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens this year and who ends up coming out of training camp as a starter and who can stay healthy.
I hear you. Real quick, I just wanted to say I was searching for a specific tweet for Al-Shaair. I couldn't find it. I think it was Pro Football Focus, but this came up and I thought it was interesting. Grant Cohn said Al-Shaair is the linebacker the 49ers wanted Reuben Foster to be. Agree or disagree?
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people wanted Reuben Foster to be better than he was, both as a human being and as a football player. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where, but I think that Greenlaw can be that way too, right? Because I can, again, you go back to 2019, that stop on the goal line.
Yeah.
I could just as easily imagine that being Reuben Foster.
Yeah.
So it's either or. And I think that that's going to be one of the more interesting position battles, an early look at a position battle in training camp. That's going to be a ton of fun to watch.
100%. With that said, guys, thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate all you guys. It had been, I think the NFC Championship game was the last show.
It was the last time that we were all together, that you and I were together. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Hope you had a fantastic evening. Thanks for tuning in. We will be back next week with another episode of the Red and Gold Standard podcast.
Yep, absolutely. And following that, guys, we're going to start delving and bringing back Niners news. So it's the busy time in the offseason in terms of the combine, in terms of the draft, in terms of free agency. So the first week of Niner news is really going to be focused on what position groups that the 49ers need to address and bolster, and where we feel like they could go. So that'll be after the live show next week. It'll be Monday through Thursday with the compendium show on Friday. So make sure you guys check that out. Like and subscribe as always. Zach, why don't you take us home, man?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Like Matt said, we got a lot of content planned for you guys this off season. Hit that like, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 2,000 subscribers. I feel like a broken record. Just hit the subscribe button. Help your boys out. We're giving away a 49ers jersey once we get there. It could be yours. Hit subscribe. We appreciate everyone.
Absolutely. And beyond Niners news, guys, just know that Zach has a new show that he has in the works. I've got some ideas on my own. We're trying to grow this channel. We're finally in a position where we're both gonna, have a little more time to dedicate to the show, and that's what we want to bring you, the best content on the web. So stick with us, guys. We appreciate you. We love having you here as always. And until next time, as always, go Niners.